Extra strong
Roman concrete.
Fully hydraulic.
structural
Solid connections.
It's the
Structural
engineering
Podcast.
Hey, welcome to the Structural Engineering Podcast. This week, Zach and I are talking about trusses. We each pick some of our favorites and go head to head. Before we get into that, we have one quick announcement. We are wrapping up season 1 here shortly with probably 1 or 2 more episodes before we get into kind of the holiday time. And we'll be back early January to start season 2. We should have better audio, better website, and a lot of other great things coming in the second season, and a lot of cool guests lined up already. If you would like to discuss something on the show, please reach out. We love talking to people. And finally, one episode we still want to do this year, I think, is all about design process. So we want to hear from you guys. If you reach out to us, send us an email. That's down in the show notes. We'll set up a time on Skype and we'll chat for a little bit. How do you start? How do you know that you're done? Do you put a piece of vellum over top some architectural drawings and start sketching? How does this all work for you? We'd love to hear it and snip it all together. So please reach out to us if you'd like to be on that. And without further ado, let's talk bridges.
Why don't we begin?
All right. You see in front of you a list of 8 of the most popular, the best trusses.
Yes.
We're each picking 3.
Okay.
What are your 3 best trusses? We'll go back and forth. You go first. And we're gonna battle this one out. So here's the deal. Now we'll spend the week building our team, and I'll meet you on the court.
I'm ready to spar.
So Zach, we talked earlier this week, and we decided we'd assemble a team and have a little competition here. This is bridge team versus bridge team. Do you feel like you got a good team?
Dude, my team's going to win every time.
Really? Well, why don't you tell me, who do you have?
I got Mr. Howe. I don't know if you've ever heard about him, but you know, he hangs out around town and pretty much anywhere you go. I got Mr. Bowstring Truss.
He's everywhere, Mr. Bowstring.
I would say he's maybe not everywhere, but he's architecturally pleasing. And then I got I don't even know how to say it, lenticular.
Yeah, lenticular truss.
Lenticular, which is pretty cool.
It's extremely pleasing to the eye.
It is very pleasing to the eye.
Is it efficient in any way? We'll get there.
It's architecturally efficient.
That's a good word.
Max, what lineup you got this week?
All right, I'm bringing to the field Mr. James Warren and the Warren Truss, which I feel like James Warren does not deserve credit for. We also got the Bailey Truss. Bailey, he's kind of the Swiss Army knife of it all. This is not exactly a truss as much as it is a system. It's a prefabricated bridge system. Super cool, built for anything, like real deployable. You can assemble it all without any, giant equipment. So Bailey's kind of my do-it-all guy. And then my architectural pleasing fella, that's Mr. Verendeel. So he's wrapping up. He comes to the game looking pretty good, and he can carry his own weight, but not anybody else's.
I gotta tell you, that's actually my favorite one of all.
The Verendeel?
When it's done, yeah, when it's a real one. I think it's faked very often, but
it is faked very often, yeah. I wanted to spread between a real classic. To me, when I think of a truss, like a Warren Truss, every time I pass on a truss, I'm like, oh, is that a Warren Truss? And I'm probably always wrong, but now I know. That's just the one to me, is like, that is a truss. The Pratt and the Howe are the same, and they're just like, that's a boring truss.
Whatever. I think the Howe and the Pratt, yes, you're totally right. They're very, very similar. But I think you see them equally as much as yours. Let's
go one for one, because we each have, we sort of a similar theme here. We each have a very salt of the earth truss, right? And then we each have an architectural truss and maybe a miscellaneous truss. I think lenticular versus Bailey is a good combination. All right, hit me.
All right, so I'll start with the Howe truss. It gets back there for quite a while. It's been around for a long time. It was introduced by the American architect William Howe, so obviously very smart guy.
Oh yeah. This will work real good. Hold on, can you describe it? I need to know what I'm looking at.
This truss has, it's a very typical, let's say, bridge truss that you might see, where it has a top chord, bottom chord, all triangles. And the thing is the diagonals start from low to high on each end of this truss, with having intersecting vertical elements as well. So if you think about it, you have pretty much a big rectangle with a bunch of triangles in it that oppose each other. So the triangles are all facing in towards the center of the truss.
Okay.
When the Howe truss was developed and built, a lot of times it was built with wood. Now, a lot of times in large applications is where it's being used. We kind of brought up before, similar to a Pratt truss, the diagonals just would face a different direction than how it's currently shown, but it's got strong differences. So the diagonal structural beams slope towards the center, like I was saying. The Pratt slopes outward. So the nice thing with this bridge is purely utilizing these sections of and just compression and tension.
Wouldn't it be more efficient if the longer members were in tension and the shorter members are in compression? That just feels a little more efficient to me.
Never. So this was first developed by a guy that invented the sewing machine. We're talking about geniuses out there, Max.
Seriously, that's pretty. I'll give you that. The guy did a lot.
Yeah. So this William Howe guy, before he became an architect, was actually a farmer. Until about the late 1918. Sorry, he was a farmer until about the late 1830s, and then he started getting into building bridges, and I think the term back in the day of an architect was a lot more broad than it is today. I think a lot more of them did a lot more kind of structural engineering-esque things. So,
oh yeah, there was a lot more overlap, which is still the case in most other countries, I believe.
So Max, how do you come at me with that? I mean, I just threw out some stuff that I don't even think you can come back with. All
right. We're talking about a slightly newer bridge. They had a couple more years to think about it, and they said, I've got a much better idea than this how we do it truss. This is the Warren truss, patented in 1848 by its designer James Warren and another guy, Willoughby Theobald Monzani. And you can see why they went with Warren as the name for the truss. But the first construction of the truss was, I think, a little bit later in 1850. So to give you an image of what this thing looks like, it's an equilateral triangle. So you still have your top chord and your bottom chord, and it's diagonals the whole way. So both members can be in tension and compression. The first bridge to ever use this system was the Newark Dyke Bridge. And this guy was in England. Although this is the first one of the official Warren Bridge. When you were doing this investigation, Zach, did you hear of a guy named something Whipple at all? Mr. Whipple?
I did see some stuff about Mr. Whipple.
Man, Mr. Whipple seems real cool. Mr. Whipple was a bridge designer in the early 1800s, and he didn't seem to care what the shape was. He would just do whatever seemed the most efficient, and he toyed around with a lot of sizes. So Warren, the truss shape and kind of the process of constructing the Warren Bridge was patented in 1848 in England. It had already been built in the US a couple of years prior by this guy, Mr. Whipple. And he had made all sorts of different types of trusses, and he would just test, what had the least amount of steel required. And this is kind of early when they didn't even have the analysis down for a truss. So
I wonder if it was a lot of kind of trial and error.
Oh man, the guy, Mr. Whipple's first name is Squire. God, he's good. So they didn't even have a good way to determine loads in the truss until about 1850. So this was developed by W.B. Blood. And at the same time, Mr. Whipple, or Squire Whipple, developed around the same time in the US the same analysis technique. So, these slightly earlier bridges, they didn't have... Actually, I don't know how they were analyzing them. It's possible. Going a little, I'll jump back, but the Bailey truss that we're going to get into, the way they decided how much it could hold was they just drove a bunch of tanks over it that were full of pig iron, and they just see they checked if it collapsed and it didn't. So they said, we'll take it. That was it. Yeah. But I want to go back to Mr. Whipple. So he just very a generalist here. He had a cool quote because the Warren Trust started to become popular. And he was like, oh, I've been doing this. And he basically just didn't seem to care. He was saying, these are wrought iron skeleton girders upon triangular plan, such as have been called Warren girders, and by some regarded as a newly invented combination. They are merely trusses with parallel chords and diagonals. So to him, these are all the same. And I think, realistically, they're all the same.
Yeah, I think the Pratt, Warren, Howe, even a K-truss, it's all kind of using the same methodology of triangles.
I do have a cool Warren truss, again by Mr. Whipple. And this was later was called a double Warren. So if you imagine equilateral triangles and then flipped. So there's two of them. There's a lot more members, but the members actually end up, by Mr. Whipple's calculation, having 8% less iron. So it ends up being a lighter bridge with many, many more members. Kind of looks like a strip taken out of a checkerboard. Oh, and finally, if you imagine a biplane, biplanes always use the Warren Truss for structure between the wings. So that's my winning piece, and we could probably move on.
That's pretty cool. Okay. I think we'll have to give that first round to me, but yours was cute.
I'm giving the first round to Mr. Whipple.
I would agree.
Yeah. All right. So I'm picking next, and I'm picking Bailey. And I already talked about this briefly, but I picked Bailey because he's the workhorse. He's the do-it-all truss. He is actually very similar to a double Warren, but he's kind of his own little animal. Who are you bringing against the Bailey?
I'm going to bring the bowstring.
Bowstring. Okay.
I think my bowstring can take your Bailey down.
All right. Tell me about bowstring.
So the bowstring truss is, just to start off with describing it, is exactly what it sounds like. If you took a bow and you pulled back the string, creating a curvature or a half circle or so, that is what the top chord of this looks like. It's a big arc. It's got a flat bottom chord, and then it's very similar to our previous truss, which has diagonals. The only thing different is the diagonals could go either into the center or away from the center. The interior orientation of the members can vary, but the idea of the bowstring is your roof is a curved element, and so it's using the strength of the arc and how all of that kind of works together. Your top chord's going into compression, your bottom chord's into tension. Depending on how you have things laid out, you'll have some vertical members that are going to be also in tension, and then your diagonals in compression.
So it's like a cut from a circle, not necessarily half radius, although it could be, but it's a chunk taken out of a circle. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think this is something that was used a lot, probably 50, 60 years ago. A lot in wood construction.
I've seen so many of these as wood or steel in like 50-year-old warehouse type applications with 50-foot spans to CMU with wood decking roof.
Exactly. So these are also kind of I would say they're used to get the curvature of the roof. I mean, you're not going to put a flat roof on this and overbuild. I mean, you're going for a certain look. And so at least talking about in the sense of going to a building like you're talking about, these are also used for bridges. They're not actually the best for bridges, though. They've had a lot of issues with failures, not catastrophic, but of members part of this truss system.
Why is that?
So something that happened a lot with that said was the interpretation back in the day of what elements were seeing what type of loads when looking at bridges, and that's where it caused a lot of issues. Researching the bowstring truss, especially in wood, in that era, there's a lot of it that was having issues. A lot of times your purlin would come over to panel points, and maybe those are longer span purlins, and have crushing issues. And there's more information on how to retrofit bowstring trusses than about designing bowstring trusses, and especially in the wood realm. I think if you're using an open web steel joist, they can make those bowstring steel joists, right? You can order a very traditional, or not traditional, but steel. Now, nowadays you could design a bowstring truss. They're one of my favorites to see in existing buildings. You get a big maybe triangular truss or whatever. It's like, okay, whatever. But you see this cool curve that was built back in the day.
Absolutely. The amount of labor that probably went into those, would just be so expensive now. But then it was a little more reasonable. These generally are just beautiful. The wood ones are, laminated or lapped wood and just cut to a perfect curve. They look real cool. I do wonder, putting the top chord in compression as a bent member seems pretty inefficient from the truss side,
I would agree.
You're inducing a moment right off the bat.
That's a fair assessment.
I think it's definitely one of my favorites to see.
It is. I don't really have a preference. I think there's certain one. The bowstring, I think, is a cool traditional, in my mind, truss that you see in these older buildings. But I don't know. I think the classics that we already talked about, the Howe, the Pratt, the Warren, like those are super efficient trusses that have a lot of places are used and whatnot. And then once you start getting into more complicated, they seem almost forced.
Yeah. The Warren, Howe, and the Pratt are just, that's a toolkit. That's all you need.
Now, before we get into yours, quick side question here. Have you ever designed a truss?
Yes, I have. I've not ever done a bridge, but I've designed trussed elements. I can think of some cold form with straps and struts. Nothing notable. Have you been able to do that?
The only ones I've done are actually out of glue lamb members, and they're big trusses, architectural, oversized to look, beefy. The connections were beefed up to look beefy. They're very efficient shapes. There's actually one I did where the bottom chord was actually arched, and that was pretty funky.
Ooh.
But very cool. So, Max, how do you now think you're going to be able to take down my bro string with your truss?
Your bro string?
My bro string.
With my bro Bailey. So, Mr. Bailey, Donald Bailey, was a civil servant in the British War Office. And as a hobby, he liked to tinker with bridges. He'd made these little models and whatnot. So he came up with this idea, and he made a prototype of a deployable bridge that people could just assemble in the field under any condition. And depending on the span and what it needed to carry, it was sort of modular, so you could make it stronger as required. And in World War II, so I think 1941, this thing started to go out. It became this... It was used a ton in the 1940s, and then for sort of developing countries and countries with any sort of conflict where they had bridges taken out, these things would be used for the next. I mean, there's still a couple early ones still in place, although they're definitely temporary structures. You can still buy these things. There's a Bailey Bridge Company that still exists, and they're still deployed all over the world to get people across things. To get people across whatever they need to cross cheaply and quickly. One of the perks of this sort of system is that you can deploy it from one side. So you can kind of build it and let it cantilever out and then push it with a truck so it plops down on the other side. I'm not quite sure how that works. But so this thing comes in these little tiny segments. They are 10 feet by, I think, 6 feet. And you can imagine it as a rectangle made up of two equal squares, and then those squares are also have a rotated section. So there's two triangles in the middle of that. So all the sections are square. So it's a big rectangle, two smaller squares, and then in those two smaller squares, the same size square rotated 90 degrees. And they designed this thing so that you can stack up to 3 wide and up to 2 tall. So you can go super far with these bridges, and it's kind of whatever, like they can take tanks, they can span, I think the farthest one I read was 260 feet or something. 6 people can carry one of these panels. So everything can be assembled by hand and it's all bolted together. And I just picked this because I thought it was just so cool that such a productive and a bridge that can carry so much can just be assembled by really a handful of people.
Yeah, so it was developed out of a need.
It's developed in England, but the U.S. and any of the Allied troops, they all started to use this bridge. And while people were manufacturing them, they had to make sure that everything fit with all the other bridges because everything was totally interchangeable. While they were manufacturing these things, one example from a factory I heard is that they would just build the bridge on the floor, and guys on one end would be disassembling it, and guys on the factory floor would be assembling it. So they would just like continuously push this bridge through. So, if something didn't fit up, they would toss it or machine it or do whatever they had to do. But they would just keep sliding this thing across the floor. So once it was assembled, they knew it would fit together.
Yeah, I like that it's so modular and can just be used wherever it needs to go. I think that's a pretty cool type of bridge system to have.
Yeah, I think it's not really a shape. I mean, you'll find people that call it a Bailey truss. I don't know if it really is. It is unique in shape. So I guess in that sense it is.
I actually wanted to be a bridge engineer when I came out of school, and then I sat down with a bridge engineer that does like the cool architectural massive bridges, and he pretty much said it is so difficult to get to that level to where you're doing these big, significant, cool, architecturally driven bridges, that if I wanted to do things, cool structure that you're going to get to see, and you're going to have to go to the structure, the building kind of structural side, not the bridges. And it was kind of eye-opening that, majority of the bridge engineering discipline, at least to what I was told, does more of kind of the traditional DOT concrete.
Oh, man. Yeah, it's all precast or spec bridges.
Exactly. Spec bridge is exactly the way to describe it.
I think you made the right choice.
I agree. I think I did as well. Now, Max, I think we're even now. I think we're tied here. And it's the best out of 3. What do you got for me? What's your last card you're going to drop here?
Here comes the Verendeel Truss. That's Belgium right there. Arthur Verendeel, born in 1852, was a civil engineer from Leuven, Belgium. He was very much an architectural engineer, and I can appreciate this. He had a great quote that I found. He said, "When constructing in metal, the dimensions must be determined a priori by aesthetic considerations, and only afterward should mathematical formulas be used." So he definitely believed in the engineer's aesthetic.
I think these things are awesome. To me, hearing you say kind of how the designer approached this, the Belgian civil engineer, and the idea of mathematics come later, and that's exactly what it looks like. That I feel like it loses a lot of its efficiencies by not having that triangle, being square, all these moment connections. I mean, it's beefy. When it's used correctly, or when it's used to its fullest capacity, it's a beautiful bridge.
So yeah, the truss was developed in Belgium and saw most of its life in Belgium as a bridge. It is super inefficient. What this thing is a bunch of boxes. It is a moment frame bridge. There are no diagonal members. Everything is carried in shear and moment of vertical and horizontal members. So construction, like a ladder. Yeah, it's a ladder truss. So connections are expensive. Everything is expensive. There is really nothing about this that is efficient as a bridge. When you start to see this thing being pretty cool is in buildings. So large cantilever structures, this is a great way to bump out a building. Anytime you see like a missing corner in a building, that's probably a Verendeel truss.
You have a top and bottom chord, and these verticals are just tying them together so that it all acts together. If it's also being used as a lateral system, is it pretty much just a moment frame. Is that how you'd analyze it?
It absolutely is. And as far as development of engineering, this bridge actually helped. It led to the development of a deformation modeling capacity of structures, which was required to mathematically analyze a Varandale truss. So this method of analysis wasn't available before this point. So they developed it, and this guy was actually a professor at some point in his career. So he brought this Varandale truss to sort of a trade show of sorts and showed it as an example of his mathematical equation. So he built this truss and he loaded it, and he showed that he could predict the deflection of the truss. So he was more of a less of a practical engineer. We'll say more of everything else. He was into the aesthetics and the mathematical rigor. He's got a cool truss, that's for sure. What do you have?
I've got the lenticular truss, and what it looks like is a lens. If you look at a lens sideways, not straight through, but sideways, it's got a top arch and it's got a bottom arch. With the arches, it's getting kind of similar to the bowstring, but it doesn't have that bottom flat chord. It's an arch bottom chord, an arch top chord, and then it's got verticals at some spacing, and then X bracing in between the verticals.
So it's inefficient in the top and the bottom.
Correct. And then the bridge, like for this instance, let's talk about bridges. The bridge deck is actually at the lowest point of the bottom chord is where the bridge deck level would be, and then the verticals extend past the bottom arch to pick up the bridge deck. Is the traditional way that these trusses were done. Now there's a modified one as well, where if you take the center between the top chord and the bottom chord and then you have the roadway go through there. So the traditional lenticular truss supports everything below kind of the bottom. If you look online, we'll have some pictures in the show notes if you're on our website. It looks very funky. Yeah, I really like it. I think it's a really cool looking truss. It doesn't, like, if you look at it, you're like, how did someone come up with that? I think it's super cool. And so this truss, one of the first times it was ever used was in 1823. And it was patented in 1878 by William Douglas. So the way it's described is the top and bottom chords of the truss are arched and they form a lens shape. So the lenticular pony truss bridge was designed and involves a lenticular truss extending above and below the roadway bed. So that's kind of that modified one they called a lenticular pony truss.
Man, when did you say this thing was designed?
So the first one was implemented in 1823, and it was patented in 1878.
That's very early.
I think our audience, Max, is going to have to decide who won this one.
Yeah, I don't know. This one's tough.
I think maybe they should send us some pictures of cool trusses that they see being used, what they've designed. Give us their opinion. Now, I would say when I reached out on Instagram and kind of did a poll of what are people's favorite trusses, do you know what they came up with?
No.
I bet you can guess this.
Lenticular?
No.
Warren?
Nope. Your Belgium truss.
The Varandale.
So many people responded with that. I was thoroughly amazed. I thought, Warren, Pratt, Howe. I thought, those very kind of simple trusses would be what people, sure, people responded with those ones and they liked them and they've designed them. But yeah, that one came out the highest easily of what people liked. And a lot of people too agreed that like they like them when they're traditionally designed. They're to the true, amount, and they're not like faked in a sense for more visual sense, but when they're really developed and structurally, they just are awesome. So
they look cool. I don't know. I love the bow shape. So lenticular and bow arch, those are good ones for me. But I mean, I picked the Varandale because it's my favorite on the building side. I've had to toy with it a couple times recently. I've seen it in some really cool applications around Utah. So I like it a lot. But not as a bridge.
Right. So the last one I want to bring up that I just think super cool is the lattice truss. I don't know how much you came across lattice trusses in your research, but it's more or less has top bottom just like a Pratt or a Warren, but then it has opposing diagonals going each direction to make up the kind of the web members, and there's no necessarily vertical elements that are consistent through it, but there's a lot of really cool wood lattice trusses that have been used in the past.
Jeez, I'm looking at a picture. I feel like you're not doing analysis on this. This is a trial and error truss. It's just, I mean, it looks like the lattice of a garden. While I'm looking at this, also, I'm seeing a Warren quadrangular lattice truss. This guy Warren's name is everywhere. And the more I read, I don't know if he deserves. Like he was a prominent engineer in England, and he knew his stuff, I'm sure. But he wasn't the first to think of any of this bridge stuff. I'm Mr. Wiggle. He's the guy, or Whipple, whatever it is. We got to rename all of these.
Mr. Whipple. I like it. All right, guys. Thanks for joining us this week and talking about trusses. I think in the future we'll probably, choose a truss and really dive deep into it. Maybe do an example of kind of maybe a little bit of a design approach and dive more into maybe a Warren or a Howe or a Pratt truss and go through, a lot more detail on it. But here we kind of wanted to do a higher level of discussion and kind of debate. I think Max and I have similar tastes in truss, but as you guys found out, we also don't. So please reach out to us with any questions you have on trusses. Let us know what you guys have designed, and we'd just like to chat with you. So reach out to us on Instagram, Facebook, emailing. We'd love to talk to you guys, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye-bye.